Hi, I'm Ashley McElwain, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder and CEO of Foundation Restoration. Welcome to Foundation Restoration's Real Talk podcast, where you'll find real people discussing real issues while offering real help at the intersection of clinical expertise and a biblical perspective. We're so glad you've joined us.
Well, welcome everybody to this episode of the Real Talk podcast. So glad that we could be together. I hope that you are enjoying spring wherever you're at. Here in Raleigh, North Carolina, we have got quite the pollen everywhere. So we've got the yellow coating on all of the things, but I love that it's a good sign of the fact that everything is in full bloom and that it is all springing forth to life, and I just absolutely love that. So things are starting to look really green and in full bloom here, and even though that comes with the yellow dusting, it's a price that I am willing to pay. So grateful for the beautiful spring weather. It's exciting to think Foundation Restoration next month, May, the end of May, we'll be celebrating 15 years of ministry. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, really excited and amazed that God has sustained us for 15 years. It's incredible when you have an idea that God breathes into you and a desire, and you see it come to life, and then you see it continue to grow and blossom. It's just truly an incredible opportunity and an incredible thing to just see that 15 years later, how far God has brought this ministry. And I'm just incredibly grateful. Make sure that you stay connected with us on our social media. Places we're most active are Instagram. Our handle is at FND Restoration, and Facebook. We've got a Facebook page. Would love for you to connect with us there. You can go to our website and sign up for our e-newsletter. You just have to scroll down on the homepage and you can sign up there. But we'd love for you to be connected with us because we're probably going to do a big 15-year open house party here at the Foundation Restoration office. And so we'd love for you to come and participate and celebrate, see our office, and celebrate what God's done for 15 years here at Foundation Restoration. So make sure that you're connected with us on social media. Make sure that you're connected with us through our e-newsletter. Those are the best ways just to kind of be the first to know when things are happening, when they're happening, where to sign up, etc. But we would love for you to be a part of our open house celebration that will be here at the Raleigh office sometime in May or maybe early June. I know I'm a little behind here on getting it planned, but that's just life. So would love for you to participate. Also, it's just a great reminder that if you support our ministry, that if you believe in our mission of really providing this clinical expertise, a biblical perspective to help save lives, marriages, and families through things like our podcast, through our professional therapy, which we have a scholarship fund and reduced rates that we offer. And again, now with our training room, having some of those in-person events, and we just continue to try to increase our programming. If you believe in our ministry, if you've been blessed by our ministry, it's just a good reminder. We'd love for you to support our ministry financially. You can do that at foundationrestoration.org/donate. We would absolutely cherish and really safeguard and appreciate your financial support. We absolutely appreciate our donors in such a significant way. Each of you are celebrated and just praising the Lord for you, and so grateful for your support. So just a reminder, we do need support, and we do need financial support to keep our ministry afloat. We're so grateful for those who have supported us throughout these 15 years, and we would love for you to be a part of what we do in the 15 to come and all of them beyond. But we're so grateful for our donors, our supporters, and we would just ask you to prayerfully consider becoming a partner with our ministry, whether that's a monthly donor, whether that's one-time donations, whether you want to be a matching donor, whether you want to sponsor one of our events, whatever that looks like. We would just absolutely cherish and appreciate your partnership. So 15 years of ministry. It's crazy to think about. So grateful for the Lord's goodness. So thankful for those who have helped sustain us with their prayers and their financial support. And thankful for our team who serves faithfully each and every day alongside of me. And I'm so grateful for every person who's ever had a part in this ministry. So thank you. Well, It's been a minute since we've done an Ask Me Anything episode, but it's back. And in this segment, you ask the questions and I offer up some answers from my personal perspective as a marriage and family therapist, as a believer, follower of Jesus. So today we're tackling whether or not you should always support your spouse. In this commonly asked question, we're looking at whether a husband and or wife should always take the part of their spouse, show their undying support, and just agree with their spouse blindly or otherwise, no matter what. It's a sticky subject, it's a common question, and we're untangling it in today's Ask Me Anything episode. So, if you are married, should you always side with your spouse no matter what? Well, the short answer to that, which might shock you, is no. But before you get up in arms or get all feisty with me, just hear me out when it's a no and why it's a no. No one is always right. That's the bottom line. There is no one that is always right. So for us to say that somebody is always right, well, that would just be a falsehood. The reality is your spouse isn't always right, and neither are you. So for you to blindly or all in consistently support your spouse no matter what and say that he is always right or she is always right, or for them to do the same, you both are kind of enabling one another just to do whatever you want to do. And the reality is, your spouse isn't always right. You're not always right. And so it's important to remember that there's no way for us to pretend that either of us are. Therefore, there will be times we just don't agree with our spouse and we can't agree with them or support them, so to speak. And I think that's part of an important distinction is for us to say that we're not supporting our spouse because we don't always agree with our spouse. That's a very dangerous approach because not agreeing or disagreeing with somebody does not mean that we don't support them. It means that we don't agree with them. And we can't always agree with somebody. And we shouldn't want somebody to just blindly agree with us. I love my mom always said that, you can agree to disagree. And that is certainly true in this situation. So we cannot use the verbiage, well, you just don't support me, when in fact it's just, I don't agree with you. And we don't need to always agree with our spouse. We can't always agree with anybody. So agreeing with somebody just to agree with them out of an obligation is both dishonest and it's harmful because it's fake. It's a facade. And a lot of times it's enabling the person to just do something that maybe you don't agree with or maybe isn't even right. So that's the first part of just this whole untangling all of this of whether or not you should always support or agree with your spouse is the fact that no one is always right. So no, we cannot just say, yes, you're right. Yes, yes. We don't want to be surrounded by yes men because at the end of the day, if we're always surrounded by people who just agree with us, we're not growing. They're not growing. We're just living a lie. Secondly, I would say under this umbrella of no one's always right is that the goal of marriage is oneness and intimacy. So if we just blindly follow, agree with, or side with our spouse no matter what, we aren't cultivating a genuine, authentic relationship. So there can't be honesty and there can't certainly be growth, let alone the intimacy or the oneness that we're chasing after. Because again, blindly following or agreeing with somebody just to agree with them is not authentic because there is no way for us to always agree on everything. 3, the relationship in each spouse cannot be so fragile that we can't have healthy dialogue in disagreements about our viewpoints or our stance on things. If that's the case, if we cannot agree, we cannot have a healthy dialogue about our viewpoints or our differences, then there is a bigger issue in that marriage that needs to be addressed because there has to be the ability to have a healthy dialogue and not always agree with one another and have to kind of have these tough conversations where you navigate how you move forward with the issue. But if you cannot do that, if you cannot have a conversation where you don't necessarily agree, but you hear one another out, your marriage has a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. The fourth point I would say in regards to no one is right is that you aren't always right. Your spouse isn't always right. Therefore, you can't always claim that he or she is, and neither can they claim that you are. It just doesn't work because, again, and I kind of started out with a similar point of just you cannot pretend. It is a facade. It is playing pretend. It's fake. It's phony. It's not authentic and it's not real, which then would point to, is the relationship, is the marriage authentic and real if you can't be authentic and real in how you feel about something? And again, if you can't have a healthy dialogue of, hey, I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't agree with this choice. I don't agree with how you're treating somebody. If the person can't hear you, and again, that doesn't mean that they're going to agree with you, but if they can't hear you and if they can't respect your point of view, again, you have a bigger issue in your relationship. And what we are striving for in relationship is realness. And if you don't have realness, if you don't have the ability to be honest with your spouse, there are bigger issues that are occurring. So when and why would you say no? I mean, obviously there's some natural things that came out of the points that I just made, but here's the thing. The number one reason that you would not agree with your spouse, or why you would say, no, I can't agree with you, is that you're doing something that is in direct disobedience to the Lord. So think about the Garden of Eden. It's an easy example because most people, whether you're a believer or not, you've heard of the Garden of Eden, you've heard of Adam and Eve. Adam shouldn't have just gone along with Eve, right? Eve was tempted by the serpent, by Satan. He lured her in with lies and deception and convinced her that she should try the apple. Adam, it says in the Bible, Adam was there. And so he watches her go ahead and eat that apple. At that point, Adam could have said, hey, Eve, whoa, 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 whoa. No, I can't let you do that. God distinctly, clearly told us we cannot eat from this. The serpent is lying and deceiving us. He could have stepped in at that point. When Eve offered it to Adam, he could have said, no, 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 no. You disobeyed God, but I'm not going to disobey God because God gave us clear direction. We are not to eat of the fruit of this tree. But instead, Adam just went along with what Eve did. Now, we can try to imagine or reason out why he did that. But at the end of the day, Adam let Eve directly disobey God. And then he too partook in that disobedience by consuming the apple as well. So Eve was directly disobeying God, and as was he, allowing her to be the guinea pig of disobedience, but then also a participant. And so this is a perfect example of where Adam should have said no. He should have said, I don't agree with you on this. I cannot support your decision. But he did. And obviously you and I and the whole world, for all of humanity, we are aware of the disastrous consequences of Adam just agreeing, complying with Eve in her disobedience to the Lord. So if we see that our spouse is doing something that goes against the word of God, the prompting of the Holy Spirit, we cannot just comply for compliance sake. We have to push against our spouse and say, this isn't right. This is why it's not right. This is why I cannot agree with you. This is why I cannot comply with you. Again, so there's examples of this. I'm using a biblical example, which there are lots of those. But again, say your spouse is mistreating somebody. You can't just say, "Oh, all good. That's my spouse, so I'm all on board with that." Absolutely not. Being a ride or die spouse who supports your spouse, again, supporting is not agreeing. We can support our spouse and not agree with our spouse. We can support our spouse and still say, nope, I can't side with you on this. What you did was wrong, and there's no way around that. So you've got to take responsibility and accountability for the choices that you made. And I'm here to walk through that with you, but I cannot just condone it and agree with it because you felt like doing it or because you feel justified in doing it. So No, we absolutely have to address our spouse's behavior and not enable it and not condone it. That's not love. That's not support. We don't champion somebody. Think about this through the lens of parenting. You don't champion your kid. They say, I really want to touch this burner. I really want to touch this hot burner. And you say, honey, you can't touch that hot burner. Do you not love your kid because, first of all, you said, no, you can't do that? Or do you love your kid because you said, no, you can't do that? Now your kid continues to say, no, I want to, I want to, I want to. And you say, no, no, you can't do that because if you do, there's consequences. You will get burned, you will get hurt. But again, if that child continues to push against that and say, no, but I want what I want when I want it, what is it loving to say, oh, okay, then you go ahead and you do it and I'll stand back and watch the damage? Absolutely not. Love says, I cannot allow you to because I have to protect you. I see what you can't see. Now, granted, with a parent, adult to adult conversation or situation, that's different, and I understand that, but it's the same concept of we can't just agree with someone blindly or condone their behavior just because. If it's dangerous, destructive, or disobedient, we cannot do it. So God calls us, in this example that I was talking about, if your spouse is being cruel to someone, God calls us to be kind, to be gentle, to be loving, selfless. How can we then cheer our spouse on who's doing the opposite of these things, which is ultimately disobedience to the Lord? We have to, as iron sharpens iron, we have to call our spouse out. We have to say, no, I cannot condone that behavior. And here's why. And if you look at so many stories in the Bible where a spouse didn't comply or just support their spouse, there are many of them. So again, the Christian community says, no, you have to just support your spouse. Especially we see this a lot with women are supposed to just submit to their husbands. But God is not calling us to subservience, which is just blind, okay, whatever you want. No, submission comes from a posture of strength that says, I trust your leadership and I trust that you too are submitted to the Lord. So submit to one another out of reverence to the Lord. The husband is to be submitted to the Lord, and then the wife is able to submit to her husband in his leadership. But the reality is, the Bible is full of stories where a spouse didn't comply or just agree with, or what some people would like to label support. But really, what it is they just didn't agree with their spouse. You look at Abigail. Now, this is a story I tell in a lot of my speaking engagements, and I have been told, please don't tell that story. To which I say, I'm absolutely telling that story because God did. So if God's telling that story, guess what? I'm going to tell that story too because he thought it was important to share, as do I. Abigail in 1 Samuel 25. Look it up, read the story. She is a perfect example of where she knew that her husband was not making a good, wise decision, and he was making a selfish decision. And so her conviction to the Lord and his desire, she went against her spouse and ultimately saved herself and saved her entire family, and God dealt with her husband. Job, in Job 2, he calls his wife out on her disobedient attitude, right? She tells him, curse God and die. And Job says, like, how can you say that? Absolutely not. Why do we take the bad? We'll take the good from God, but we won't take the bad from God. He challenged her. And again, we see this throughout the Bible. For the sake of time, I won't list out all these stories, but I would encourage you, look at Job 2. Look at 1 Samuel 25 and the story of Abigail. Agreement isn't always necessary in a marriage. But I will say this, how we address those things does matter. So we have to consider that we must speak up when our spouse is in disobedience to the Lord, but we also have to make it clear why we are disagreeing with our spouse. And if your spouse won't hear it, that says a lot about your spouse and maybe the fact that you're doing the right thing to not agree with them. Because if they're not even willing to hear you out as their spouse, when you're saying, hey, you know what, as your God-given spouse, I have some feedback for you. If they can't hear that feedback and they just think that they're right and you should follow them regardless, that is dictatorship. And that can point to a lot of other things, narcissism and control, boundary issues, which we won't get into all of that. But that's a red flag if somebody cannot handle a dialogue about a disagreement or having a difference of opinion or challenging your spouse to understand why they did what they did and letting them know that you don't agree with it. Another reason why you would say no, if they're doing something dangerous and or damaging to themselves, to the marriage, to the family, to the household of faith, then absolutely we must stand up. We have to say no. So again, if we see our spouse making a decision that's going to damage or destroy, we do need to step in and not just side with them or agree with them. Again, I could never possibly cover all of the examples of this, but again, if we see our spouse is struggling with alcoholism or substance abuse or some other kind of abuse, physical, emotional, verbal abuse of yourself or of somebody else, if you see them bullying somebody, or if they are gambling or showing some other addictive behavior, if they're causing strife and division, and it's not based off of actual concern, which usually strife and division come from selfish motives, not selfless motives. If you see that they are, again, being destructive in some way to themselves, again, maybe it's some people, I feel like things can get out of balance. And so if they're working too much and you see that it's taking a huge toll on them and you say, I really need to talk to you about this, there's a lot of areas where this could absolutely creep in, where you need to step in for their own safety or for their own help, obviously for the marriage, or again for your family. If you can't let a spouse just verbally abuse their children or push them way too hard. So there are many times where if you see that they're being destructive or doing something damaging or dangerous, then absolutely you have to step in. You can't just sit back and say, oh, okay, that's all right, go ahead and do that. We must, as somebody who loves our spouse, we must step in. And then the third area is just where there's a lack of oneness and disunity. And so again, if you see that your spouse is showing a spirit of division, and again, this could be in just nitpicking, this could be in slandering you, this could be in an effort to work against you in some way. If there's constantly selfish pursuit and you're seeing where there's a lack of oneness, or you're seeing that there's a disunity and this person is purposely cultivating that, then you have to step in and be able to say no. You don't just blindly agree with somebody who, again, is causing that division, who is choosing to not be one in the relationship. You have to step in. You have to say no. You have to advocate for the truth and for reality. You cannot just blindly agree with them or follow them. The third part of this then is just how to say no. And that can certainly be a challenge, but this is a very key ingredient. And so, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that the goal in saying no is not to be combative, it's not to be self serving or selfish. It should come from a posture of humility. So, again, if you're coming into it saying, I don't agree with you, if you come in with that posture like, hey, I need to talk to you about this because I don't agree with something, and out of love and concern, I need to address it. When you come in with a posture of humility, that's very different than if you come in combative and self serving. If that's the case, you're potentially the problem. Secondly, how to say no is to offer curiosity to gain insight and understanding into why they are who they are, why they want to make this decision, why they are choosing to do this. Why are they making this choice? Again, the Bible talks about a wise man gains understanding. So gain understanding versus just presuming that you understand their motives or that you understand what's going on. So come into it with that posture of humility. Hey, there's something you've been doing. I don't agree with it, but I need to understand. I want to understand. Can you help me understand why you're doing X, Y, or Z? And why you feel that that's appropriate or right? And be able to have a little bit of a healthy dialogue where you're trying to genuinely understand why this person is doing this and why they feel that it is acceptable that they're doing it. Then the third part of that is offering up that you can't support their decision. So if you gain the understanding and it's like, they're making up lies of things that you saw for yourself that didn't happen, or if you know for a fact that their decision is contrary to the word of God, or their decision is destructive, that's where you can say, hey, I'd love for you to understand that I don't agree with your decision, and here's why I don't agree with your decision. So as you've sought to understand, now you're seeking to help them understand where you're coming from and why. If they refuse to hear you, this is kind of what I was talking about in the previous section. If they refuse to hear you, then that's further evidence of why agreement of their decision is likely unhealthy. It points to some bigger issues in their life, probably in the marriage, and where that needs to be addressed. If somebody cannot hear you, they refuse to hear you, they refuse to even consider understanding into an issue or why you would say no or why you can't agree with them or why you can't support them, that points to a bigger issue that you're likely going to need professional care to work through. The fourth point of this is just when not to say no. So again, I'm not out here saying you should be combative and pushing against your spouse, but we are iron sharpens iron. That's a painful experience where we're rubbing off the roughness in our lives where we become more useful tools for the Lord. So that is the goal of marriage, is as you become more and more one, as you cultivate intimacy, you're able to be very honest and vulnerable, and you can speak into one another's lives and be able to grind off the rough patches to make us more sharper and effective for the kingdom of God. But again, the goal is we want to be in agreement. We want to be in unity. And again, but when we come to a place where we realize this is dangerous, this is disobedience, this is destructive, this is unhealthy, we should have the opportunity to disagree with our spouse and to stand up and speak our mind as to why we feel that way. And while first seeking to understand why they feel the way that they do. But there are many times when you should not say no. And so this is going to tease this out a little bit more. We don't say no out of selfish motives. So again, if you're just trying to control your spouse and the narrative, that's a good no. Like, that's not a good no. Again, if we're operating out of selfish motives, we're just trying to control our spouse, we're trying to control the narrative and get our own way, that's not a reason to say no to your spouse or disagree with them. But it is, in reverse, a reason to say no to somebody else. If they're presenting with the selfish motives, trying to control you, trying to control the narrative, get their own way, own selfish way, then that's a good no. But if you're doing that, that's not a good no, and your spouse should not accept that. Controlling behaviors and the need for your spouse to think and believe what you tell them to think and believe goes in that damaging and destructive column. The goal here is not manipulation. That is the opposite of what we're working toward. The goal is not manipulation, it's not control, and it's not selfishness. Again, we're looking to make wise choices and help our spouse to do the same. We are trying to live selflessly. We're trying to do things that make the world a better place and that honor God, especially, again, if we're believers. We're not operating for our gain. We're operating for the betterment of the Lord, His plans, His purposes in people's lives. Another time not to say no is when it's just about winning. So it's not about winning the argument. We're not looking for, okay, how can I win this, right? It's not about, again, in this moment, winning an argument. It's about winning in life by making good choices, caring about and for others. It's about seeking to understand and to be understood. So help me understand might be three of the wisest words that you can say. When someone wins, someone loses. And that's not the goal of a no or of a yes. We're not trying to win. We're trying to navigate understanding why we're making the choices we're making. And when we see that our spouse is making decisions that are not healthy, that are not good, they're not beneficial, they're not bringing oneness or unity, then we must step in. We must engage them in a conversation and in a dialogue where we seek to understand and be understood. And hopefully we can then come to an agreement or at least an understanding. So again, this all goes back to healthy dialogue, honesty, vulnerability, authenticity, but both spouses need to be willing to have that posture in these conversations. When it is about control, when it is about manipulation, when it's about controlling someone else's narrative, whenever it's about controlling someone else's choices and behaviors, again, when it's about controlling the narrative, we cannot allow it. We cannot allow somebody to continue to perpetuate something that's just untrue, even if we're married to them. We are not called to blind obedience to a person. We're called to obedience to the Lord. Even God says, I can handle it. Like, go ahead, work out with your salvation with fear and trembling. God wants us to choose Him. He wants us to be autonomous. He can handle the tough dialogue. So Why would he call us then to just blind obedience, submission, subservience, acceptance of somebody else when we know for a fact that what they're doing is destructive, unhealthy, or controlling or manipulative? So no, we are not going to condone those things. And no, we're not going to support those things when in fact it's not about support. It's about agreeing or disagreeing. And we can agree and disagree with our spouse and still support them. So while being for your spouse is so vital, that doesn't mean it's always a yes. We don't stand by and enable our spouse to be disobedient to the Lord or damaging to themselves, the marriage, and or the family or the household of faith. Love, in fact, does set boundaries, and it does push back as we work to refine and grow one another, as well as keep each other accountable, which we are called to do. So while we should be supportive of our spouse, absolutely, for our spouse and one with our spouse, that doesn't mean we are always in agreement with him or her, and that's okay. If in fact our marriage is healthy and strong, we are able to agree or disagree. We're able to speak up when it's necessary, and sometimes turn the ship around or shift the heading. That's a healthy marriage, not blind agreement or this false sense of support, which just blindly accepts anything and everything our spouse does, no matter what. No, it stands up, it stands in the gap, and it makes the right choices, and it seeks to understand, seeks to be understood, and seeks to right the ship and keep things accountable, growing and strengthening one another. Well, friends, this concludes this episode of the Real Talk podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad you did. Remember, you were handcrafted by God, are dearly loved, and greatly needed in this world. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Talk. To stay connected, follow Foundation Restoration on Instagram and Facebook at FND Restoration, or visit us at www.foundationrestoration.org for more information. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to follow or subscribe and to leave us a 5-star review so more people can find our show. Foundation Restoration is a 501c3 nonprofit ministry that believes marriage is the heartbeat of society and exists to equip, strengthen, and restore marriages through clinical expertise and a biblical perspective. Please consider supporting our ministry with a tax-deductible donation at www.foundationrestoration.org. Your gift makes programs like this possible. Thank you for your generosity and partnership.